replied that I was the real Maragad, I did not receive an apology. Instead, the person behind the desk said, "Really?" When I was eventually given my bright orange badge that clearly said presenter across the bottom, I was assumed to be hotel staff twice while wearing my bright orange badge and told that I needed to do more to get room service orders out more quickly. I was aggressively asked repeatedly, "What are you doing here?" And when I would reply that I was a featured speaker on Shabbat afternoon, I was then asked what I could possibly have to speak about. She talks about being in an elevator with people whispering about her as if she wasn't there. She was assumed again that she worked at the hotel, and she grew so uncomfortable that she had to ask a URJ staff person to walk with her from place to place so she wouldn't be questioned. And she talks about Shabbat. So those of you who have been there, you know that Shabbat at Bayaniel is incredibly magical. And she says, when others were at Shabbat services or dinner or song session, I was in my hotel room alone crying because I didn't feel comfortable and safe being out with my own people. She said, I shared these stories during my session, and while most people asked very thoughtful questions and were empathetic and supportive, as a final moment, a woman chose to interrupt the discussion and forcefully demand to share what she'd been thinking about the entire hour. And she used her time to turn everything around on me, stating clearly, offensively, and without apology, that I could have made it all better for myself had I chosen to confront the people in the elevator and explain myself. Create comfort for them. I should have made it a teachable moment and taught them that I was Jewish. Now, with some days behind us, I'm receiving messages from truly big-hearted, well-intentioned people asking if rest has helped me put it all behind me. They are hoping that time has erased what has happened, saying they hope she'll heal quickly because we have work to do. And she goes on to talk about how we know that rest doesn't make hate any better. Like, especially as Jewish people, rest doesn't make anti-Semitism better, and that doesn't work with racism either. We don't just put the incidents behind us, right? So that's a little bit of the work that I hope we'll be doing today. Just having the opportunity to discuss racism within our own community, and also give real affirmation to the voices of our African American Jewish members. So the first person who I would love to introduce you to is Tim Kirby. Tim Kirby is a PhD student at FIU, where he focuses on political economy of climate change in South Florida. So he is a new member to Temple Beth Am, but he's been active in the local Jewish community since moving to Miami in 2016, serving as graduate student chair of Hillel at FIU for 2 years. One of Tim's greatest accomplishments in that role was bringing a Valentine's Day fundraising initiative to the university for Israeli nonprofit Save a Child's Heart. As an undergraduate student, Tim was involved with the Columbia Barnard Hillel, serving as coordinator for the Israel Fellowship on campus. Tim is passionate about education, sustainability, social justice, and Judaism. So, Tim, I would love for you to share with our community a little bit about how this story resonates with you, as you have shared with me previously.
Yeah, so hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining. I very much appreciate you all wanting to be a part of this discussion and dialogue. But to answer the question, the reason why that particular story resonated with me is because I empathize with her in that I felt like for most of my life, I have been met with the same kind of questioning, to the point where I've now turned it into sort of like a coping mechanism where someone would basically, if I'm in a predominantly Jewish space or if I'm at shul or anything like that, someone is without a doubt, someone would ask me, how are you Jewish? And, I as a coping mechanism, I tend to, turn it into a joke. And my response would be, I'm fine Jewish. How are you Jewish? Like it's sort of like a way in which I have learned to like take a question that has, somewhat has been hurtful to me, because I have been in situations where I've brought someone who is not Jewish, into a predominantly like Jewish space. And, whereas they are not Jewish and they're not met with that question at all, and they're automatically assumed to be Jewish just by nature of how they look, I am immediately met with, a why are you here, kind of, or, who are you type of deal. And it's just pretty hurtful. And, when you have those like sort of situations and they're constantly, those situations constantly happen, at least for me, in terms of like being able to deal with it, I just turn it into comedy, for myself, as a way to sort of not only save myself or provide some sort of comfort for myself, but to also let the other person kind of see like it's not necessarily the absurdity in that question, but how but it makes them reflect on that particular question in of itself as to why were they asking that. So yeah, I would think that is the main reason why, that particular story like stood out to me.
Thank you so much, Tim. And it's wonderful to have you as not just a member of our Miami Jews community, but our Beth Am community. So I want to introduce now Jenna Saul, who she wrote in her bio for me that she's a Jew by choice. So now we all know. But she's a member of Temple Beth Shalom for 10 years, a High Tribester member for 13 years. She's a Temple Beth Am day school parent since 2012. She's passionate about inclusive Jewish family programming and previously served as our congregation's PJ Library co-chair. Our coordinator, PJ Libraries co-chair. She's a community connector, Shalom family liaison, where her goals were to connect and engage Jews of color, interfaith families, and the LGBTQ community. She's a graduate of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation's Olam Leadership Program and participated in the Greater Miami Jewish Federation South Dade Women's Philanthropy and Social Action Committees. Professionally, Jenna is the head of New Business Development and Government Procurement at LS&A Architecture and Interiors, owner of Outsourced MSS, a back office support company, and has recently founded the Think, Build, Dream Project, a nonprofit organization aimed at helping young Black women attend and graduate from college. So Jenna lives in Palmetto Bay, as I know many of you do, with her husband, Tom, and her gorgeous daughters, Charlie, who's 9, and Penny, who's 6, and their pug, Ginger. Jenna, I'm so happy to have you with us. You have a really unique perspective, Jenna, as a member of both our community and as a member of the Beth Shalom community. And not just as a member, but incredibly active member who takes on leadership positions. So I'm curious to hear from you, Jenna, if you feel comfortable, like what are some of the blind spots that you have seen within our community?
Hi, everyone. I feel as though these are just conversations within the day school that no one really wants to have. It's uncomfortable, conversations about race and, what's fair and what's right and what's not. And that type of behavior that's tolerated and the type of behavior that's unacceptable. And, it continues to be conversations that, leadership within the day school chooses to, not include the day school community or children in. And that may be all fair for, fine for those families. Unfortunately, it's not the case for my families. I think the first thing that happened that I was like extremely disappointed about was the Charlottesville issue that took place a couple years ago. I think 2017, 2016, right after President Trump had been elected. And, the letter came from the school. It happened right before school opened that this was not going to be a topic that was going to be discussed, in the day school. No one was going to talk to the children about it. And I had to push through it and talk to my children about it because it was important. And it was a hard discussion. And I did feel alone in that. And I talk, very often about the innocence that Black children do not get to grow up with. They don't get to be children, because from the time that it's time for them to enter school and interact with non-Black people, they have to be, told how to act, how to behave, and then what will be unfairly assumed of them. And the innocence is lost as soon as that happens. And, a lot of things happen from that, anger, frustration. I remember when I told my oldest daughter that, she was not just Jewish, but she was also Black because her mother was Black. And from that, the hardships that would come from it. It was a conversation that I remember getting as a child that I never thought that I would have to, share with my children ever. I never thought that I would have to have this talk with them. I naively thought we were so past that, and even in Beth, I thought in putting them there at this Reformed Jewish day school that I was in fact protecting them from these issues that, I didn't want to have to talk to them about that they may have encountered in public school. And that was so far from the truth. And it was extremely disappointing. So just the Charlottesville was one issue. A much larger issue was when another child at Beth was called the N-word by another classmate. These were not my children. Charlotte was in kindergarten, and this happened with boys in third grade. And just the whole issue of this, it wasn't the first time that the little boy had said it. The little boy who was called the N-word had no idea what it meant, had to ask his mother, why would my classmate call me this all the time, and to learn of that. And even when I became involved in this and I got other, Black parents together and we came to the office, we wanted to discuss this. This was serious. We were all there and present and demanded to be heard. There was still nothing that was done ultimately. The little boy who was targeted, was forced out of the school. He was completely humiliated. He was accused of being a liar, that there was no one there to witness this incident, so it could not possibly have happened. I got as many people involved in this as I possibly could, and it went nowhere. It went nowhere. And it was hard returning to Bethel after that and knowing that I was having to choose one identity over the other. And I feared for my girls. And I had to sit down and I had to tell Charlotte in kindergarten every single nasty word she could possibly hear in the hopes that she would be able to identify who said it and stay away from them. And then I had to tell her that she could not trust this information with her teachers because I knew it would not get back to me. That she was to remain silent and tell her mother, and that I would handle it from there because I could not trust that the teachers or the administration would do anything about that. That was 3 years ago. I mean, Charlotte's entering fourth grade again at Beth, and it's still something I grapple with on a daily basis. This summer, I told Tom that, I'm not sure if we should re-enroll because I had yet to have heard any sort of statement of solidarity of the Black Lives Matter movement from Beth. and it came, but it was not in something that was immediately heard or felt. And it's disheartening, it's demoralizing. And, I feel as though there's only so much I can say because I'm not a temple member. And, they try to say that the school and the temple are these two separate entities, but they're so interconnected that it's impossible for that to be, true. And so when it goes all the way up to the rabbi and nothing's done, what more is there? I feel as though I'm such a non-factor except to spread diversity, and social media and marketing materials. Look, here's our beautiful Black family, and but any real issues that I encounter are just, so sorry you feel that way, and it hurts. It really does. It really does. Because I continue to come back to Beth year after year and hope that each year is going to be better than the last.
I want to thank you, Jenna. I know that, it's not about me, but I'm pained hearing what you have to say, and definitely want to work with you and partner with you and amplify your voice and make sure that you feel safe and you feel that your girls are safe at Beth and we can do better. So it's so hard for me not to give excuses. Like, just say, I know our school didn't respond the same way that the temple did. And so you didn't receive certain things. And it was unfortunate, the changing of the heads of school. But I do know that now the school is on board and that we are partnered. And I hope we will do better in the future. Thank you for holding up a mirror. I know it's a heavy mirror and it's not fair to make you do it.
Thank you. I have so much anxiety about even speaking about this. And I have, just told friends and family that when you speak about things like this injustices that happen to you, racism that happens to you, and then people try to convince you that it's in your head or that you have to prove that someone has, been unfair to you, it takes the wind out of your sails, and much in like the Me Too movement, where we have said that we will believe women when they accuse, people of sexually harassing them or abusing them. It works the same way with racism. No one wants to stand before an audience and say that someone has mistreated me, dehumanized me, degraded me, and yet that is what we are forced to do, where we have to prove that we have been, targeted or unfairly met. And it is just it's a disheartening thing when this comes from this community that I've worked so hard at, I've given my life to be a part of. I stood before the congregation of Temple Beth Shalom and I told them that these are my people. I will walk with you wherever you will go, I will go. And I meant that. And I still mean that. I keep Shabbat every Friday night, and I am instilling Black girl magic within my girls. But it is a path that I sincerely feel that I am walking alone, even though they are there at Temple Beth. I am glad that the temple wants to do better and be better, and I am here to help. And it was funny when you said about the woman mentioning a teachable moment. Turning this into a teachable moment in the elevator. I feel like every day of my life is a teachable moment for someone that I encounter, not just at Beth but everywhere, because I feel as I am often someone's first experience with either a Black person or a Jewish person. And I represent a lot, but that is my burden, and I carry it, and I am happy to do so if it means that I am changing the lives of the person I've interacted with. I will do so if it means that I'm putting out good into the world and hopefully changing someone's mind who felt completely different. Then so be it. And and I will be that person, but it's a very lonely, sad road. And just as though I know Tim and David may be so exhausted from, having to reassure friends that, oh, you're not racist, or no, and whatever, it is just very exhausting just having to do this continuously. But I know that it's necessary, and just helping change the way, we all work together, speak together, communicate together.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you. So I want to introduce our third guest. Although I feel weird calling either Jenna or Tim guests because they're just part of the family. But David A. Love is a writer based in Philadelphia, an adjunct professor of journalism and media studies. He contributes to CNN, The Appeal, Al Jazeera, The Griot, and other publications, writing on race, politics, and justice issues. Love is a graduate of Harvard University. You might have heard of it. And the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and has a certificate in international human rights law from the University of Oxford. So David, welcome to our Beth family. On Sunday, you had a piece on the CNN website where you said, the public discourse in America over race, racism, and anti-Semitism runs the risk of evolving into an oppression Olympics with no winners. You are talking about in the article how this moment calls for confronting anti-Black racism and other forms of discrimination, including anti-Semitism, in this fight against white supremacy, and how we should be working together. So I'd love to hear a little bit, first of all, just for everybody to get to hear you speak, but to talk about the uniqueness of this moment and how the Black and Jewish community should be coming together, and also like maybe a little bit about how the Black Jewish voice can be helpful in this moment.
Yes, well, Rabbi, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with the Beth community. I have so much swirling around in my head, and I should say in the beginning that I don't have all the answers, but I definitely have my perspective, and I definitely have been thinking about these issues for a long time. Just to very briefly tell you a little bit about my story. I have been a member of the Jewish community for 15 years now. My wife, Sarah, and I met at Penn Law School, both committed to justice, tzedek, which is a very Jewish concept. And we got engaged and decided that we wanted to raise our children Jewish, and we wanted to have a Jewish household, and that was very important to us. So we started looking at different congregations here in the Philadelphia area, and we decided on Mishkan Shalom, which is a Reconstructionist congregation here in Philly, very social justice, racial justice oriented, and also a lot of interfaith families, interracial families, LGBTQ families, and it was the type of place where I felt comfortable, and we thought that was important, that I wasn't just tolerated or barely tolerated, but that I was actually respected. And the fact that there are other children of color like my children. I have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, a 3-year-old daughter, 10-year-old son. And I think what is also key, aside from the visible diversity, is that the congregation also has alliances, coalitions with churches, Black churches, mosques in the area, and they all work on issues in the community of racial justice, of immigration, minimum wage, hate crimes, things of that nature. And I think it's really important for people to have those linkages with other communities, other faiths, because I think that helps to break down the misconceptions and the prejudice. I would say that being Black and Jewish, I have definitely had my share of experiences. I'm also glad that I am in a community where, although it's, no community is perfect, people do not question me. How did I get here? Did I convert? What's my story? And that's good, because being a Black man in this country, you have to deal with that on a daily basis. But with that said, I think it's great that this congregation is having this discussion. Obviously, a lot of organizations, a lot of synagogues, other houses of worship, corporations are having these discussions. Many are not. Hopefully, those that are, they're looking beyond window dressing and surface area issues to really get into the crux of the matter. And I think that we're in a perfect time to really start to begin to talk about the issue of racism, also anti-Semitism, because I view them as both intertwined and ultimately related to white supremacy, which I think is the one thing that we all have to get to the heart of if we want any sort of change. So, I believe that just looking at the big picture in this country, which is built on, the genocide of Native Americans, the enslavement of Africans, we've never really come to terms with all of that. And that's why I believe we're seeing what we're seeing now with the death of George Floyd. It, on the one hand, is about him and the police violence that he and people of color experience every day, but it's also about systemic racism and the structures of oppression that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and have dealt with for centuries. Anti-Semitism is obviously interconnected with that because, obviously Black people and Jewish people, we both groups, and some of us are Black and Jewish, we have white supremacy as our adversary that we must overcome. And looking at the Jewish community, I believe that the Jewish community has an opportunity and a challenge to fight racism and to fight anti-Semitism. Obviously, the notion of justice, of tzedek, is very important. I believe that while, and I believe it's important to really be frank on these issues, although perhaps many white Jewish folks don't view themselves as white, it's important to be mindful of the fact that as you find yourself in this world, in this society, America very much views you as white. And it's that white skin privilege that I think is getting to the heart of why we're talking right now. So I was, I was reading and a while back, and there are different statistics, but as many as 15% of American Jews are of color: Black, Latinx, Asian, etc. That's a lot. And I think it also speaks to the fact that we don't all look alike. We don't all think alike. We have different ways of being, different ways of doing things. And I believe that it's a very uncomfortable conversation in the Jewish community, but elsewhere, to talk about these things, because people, I think, immediately find themselves on the defensive because they don't want to be viewed as racist. And I think the issue here is that, on the one hand, yes, it might be an issue of someone saying or doing things that offend. And I believe that, and in my CNN piece, I talked about the issue of Black anti-Semitic remarks that a few athletes, Black athletes and celebrities had made recently, and how we have to address that. We also have to deal with racism in the Jewish community, but I think ultimately, we have to condemn acts and statements that hurt people, but we also have to look at the structures. It's not just an issue of a few bad apples. It's an issue of the orchard, our communities, our country, the way that people are conditioned to think. It's not always a matter of someone being guilty, but it's a matter of the society being culpable and the perceptions that are just baked into the cake that we accept on a daily basis as truth without questioning them. So I'll just say that I think it's great that we're having this discussion. I think many more discussions like this have to take place, because ultimately it's hard work, and Black folks are tired. We have been talking about this for a long time. It's great that other folks are getting involved and stepping up and are trying to be counted and really make a difference. And I just want to thank you again, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, David. You're reminding me of a little bit of what when Jenna was speaking, and maybe it's because it resonated with me, but there was, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and I admit I went to like a multicultural arts magnet program, which looked like a Benetton ad. And like once I graduated from 8th grade, like I was like shocked that the world wasn't like that. But there was this, as King said, the long arc of history bends towards justice. There was this like feeling that everything was getting better. And then that stopped. And, even with the election of Barack Obama, there was a lot of more vocal racism instead of kind of covert racism. And I know in my head, part of me thought, oh, well, this is just like a pendulum. People are just overreacting, and maybe we'll get over this. And then with the election of Trump, there, certain people felt that empowered them to say hateful things, and so there might have been a thought like, okay, well, once we have a different president, like maybe the society will go back to normal, right? And there's this it doesn't feel like that's an inevitability anymore. Like we really have work that we need to do. So I want to open up the conversation. I want to invite the three of you to like speak with each other, speak with me, and also to invite those who are on the call, if they want to unmute yourself to ask a question. Or if you feel more comfortable writing it in the chat, that is okay. Carrie Stone, will you kick us off?
Oh, hi. This is incredibly powerful. It mostly just to praise everybody and thank everybody for this. Not a lot of places are educating people and starting the work in a manner that is so real and powerful and necessary. There's a lot of lip service nowadays, and I think what Beth is doing is tremendous, and I think what you're all doing is tremendous. So it's mostly just a thank you. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the idea of microaggressions and what bystanders can do to be upstanders when everything is simmering at a very low level, and yet we know it's very invidious. And I guess these are unanswerable questions, but I guess I wanted to raise the topic.
I think that's a great question, Carrie. I think that we've all been witness to things that have made us uncomfortable. And there's a question of, do I say something, or does that disempower the person that it is happening to? Or so, yes, jump on in. David, did you want to respond?
Yes, and that's a great question. I think that too often people think that racism is merely people in white sheets and with swastikas, and it can be very much these microaggressions, and it really eats at a person's soul. It really creates psychic damage. Speaking as someone who has experienced that, particularly in a work environment early in my career, where it led to me being involved in a class action racial discrimination lawsuit. It really eats at you. I think that people can do what they can to fight that by being not only an ally, but an accomplice. And whenever you can, when these things are taking place, to speak out and correct people, and to straighten them out. And I think that can go a long way, because people think that they can do these things, or maybe they don't even realize it. But I think that it's important for people to really speak up, and for those who are victims to not feel as if they're isolated and alone, and that they're somehow imagining this. And as Jenna said, basically you have to deal with that and change yourself and come back to us later. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Judith Davidoff. Judith, I can't hear you. Okay, so Miriam Lipsky.
So first of all, thank you all for sharing your stories. Jenna, I will say I'm deeply saddened by what you shared, and very sorry. So earlier today, I was on a webinar that was a panel discussion with a number of Black and white women talking about how to be allies. And so one of the things that they talked about, which I found very interesting, is, and to the previous question about how can you be an upstander, is they talked about, you can be in a meeting and you can hear a comment made that's a racist comment or a microaggression and not say anything. And then afterwards go up to the person who was directed to, or who might have been offended, and say, oh, wow, I can't believe that person said that. Did you hear that? What did you think, or whatever? Or you can use some of your social and political capital, which may have repercussions for you, and speak up in the meeting and ask somebody, what did you really mean by that statement? You know, can you explain what you're trying to say or what you're trying to get at? And that can have real consequences for you as an upstander. But that's what we need to be willing and able to do. And I think in listening to Jenna's story, I'm concerned, you know, like, where was the upstander? So, you know, it's just something to think about.
Thank you. And Jenna, do you want to respond?
You know, it's everyone's just been sending me, you know, private messages and thanking me for, you know, talking about this, and you know, the story that, you know, that really, you know, hurts is the one that happened with children that weren't even mine, you know. And it's you know, it's the fact that it could happen to mine, you know, in that, you know, we all have to look at this as if these are our children, because it's so serious and it has to be, you know, nipped in the bud as soon as possible, because it can grow into something just so far bigger and uglier and dangerous. And it hurts to speak against, you know, Temple Beth, and to create this sort of division, you know. And it hurts me to have to say that. It is one of the reasons why I've just had so much anxiety on speaking on this, because I know that it is not representative of every, you know, teacher or administrator or clergy person there, but it did happen, and lots of people knew about it, and, you know, no one did anything. I offered so many options of, you know, okay, if we're not going to suspend him, we're not going to put him in school suspension. He should, you know, study some, you know, Martin Luther King speeches and, you know, write something. He should do this. He should do that. We should bring in somebody. And I mean, it went from me offering all these solutions to just total non-issue. And it just hurt to be dismissed like that, you know, like as if, nah, doesn't matter. And to have this family ultimately leave the school, and microaggressions. This little boy was, you know, told he needed a tutor and that he wasn't, you know, he was having difficulty reading at grade level, and this, that, and the third. He goes on to another school and he's on, you know, the AB honor roll. And it's just that, you know, that is a macro issue, not just a microaggression. That's a macroaggression, that he wasn't even allowed to flourish at the school, and that is disappointing. And meanwhile, the aggressor is still there, and, you know, preparing for his own bar mitzvah, where I'm sure, you know, he'll stand before his family and friends, and someone will, you know, say very nice things about him that I'm not so sure are true, or rather that there was a big learning, teachable moment right there that never even happened, you know. He still doesn't really understand what he did wrong or how serious it is, you know. The other little boy is still being terrorized by this child and his friends. And it hurts me to know that another child is suffering and had to leave, you know, the Bethlehem family because of it. So,
Judith Davidoff, I know I called on you before. I know you have your hand up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I just put a little note in the chat room. The Sisterhood Book Club is next reading Ariel Sampson, Freelance Rabbi, which is about a Black rabbi in Brooklyn, young, zany, hip, trying to balance his Jewish life with his Black life, trying to work for social justice, navigate the community, and bring all kinds of Jews into the synagogue. Now, it's a fascinating book. Read it, and join the book group on Zoom if you want to too. That would be great if you're a woman. But rereading this book and getting to prepare to read the session, I've become aware. Are you still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. It's made me explore things in myself that I did not know were there. I thought that I had no anti-other feelings. I thought that in my soul, I was a non-prejudiced person. And as I read this book and heard Ariel Sampson and his friends talk about how distanced they feel from other white Jews, it really made me look deep inside, and I saw things I never imagined were there. And I think that reading a book like that, or talking, he talked about how he never let any white Jews know how it felt to be a Black Jew, that he was always playing a role, so no one ever got to know him. And I think we need to talk to our Black members, few though they may be, and that a book like Ariel Sampson, Freelance Rabbi, might be help us look inside.
Thank you so much, Judith. I think that was you talk about like what part of the work is, and I think part of the work is our being honest with ourselves. And there are so many wonderful books that are available, which help us to understand that, as David was teaching, that this is really built into our society. So even the most, well-meaning, involved people, like, we're still part of society. And so we have messages that are pounded in our heads and structures that are built in a certain way. But thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important and very brave. Jeff Agron, did you have a question?
Yeah, question and a comment. I wanted to comment that in 7th grade last year, we do a program on what's it called, Rabbi? I just had the name of it.
Prisms of Change.
Prisms. Thank you, other Rabbi. And I brought in some speakers trying to teach about racial issues and LGBT issues. And the kids the kids are interested actually in hearing about this, especially at that age. But, in following the work of Robin DiAngelo, and we've been talking about like individuals, and she said, no one wants to be called a racist, right? So, but we talked about our society. So I'm wondering, in addition to talking to people and educating people, whether we look within our own community, our Beth Am community, and look to see what systems may be in place that are bringing about this kind of behavior or fostering this kind of environment. So what sort of maybe racial systems are in place that we need to work on as well. So I think there's work on both sides with the individuals, and Jenna, thank you, and all of you for sharing, your stories. And we wonder what happens to the kid or to the parents, but also the systems within our own community. And I think we have to take a real hard, honest, and maybe very painful look at the systems as well.
100%. I agree with you.
Oh, and people should look up, Judith Davidoff mentioned that rabbi goes by the name Manish Tana, and he has some great stuff online. He's really interesting guy. So I haven't read that book yet though. So thank you, Judith, for mentioning that.
Can
can I just mention something to Jeff that you were mentioning? at least, especially in my work, especially in both Hillels, like at Columbia and at FIU, one of the things that I found that was incredibly rewarding, not only for myself, but for like my fellow Jewish community was, and this is just going to your point about what is something that Beth can do in order to, actually bring about like real change, systemic change, like within their communities, is one of the things that we don't necessarily highlight or realize is that within, our own communities, especially within like the American Jewish community, how Ashkenazi centered it is. And so, basically almost everything, every holiday, everything that we sort of do is centered around that very narrow view of Jewish practice. And one of the things that, I try to do, as well as, as the coordinator for Israel Fellowship, as well as, graduate student chair, was to bring other lesser known like Jewish holidays in the Mizrahi community. And one specifically that I am extremely proud of is like the Sigd dinner, which is an Ethiopian Jewish holiday. That's actually an Israeli national holiday, to just, bring about or to sort of like infuse, this idea amongst our community that, that our practices, we are all one community. And, that is just something as simple as acknowledging specific Mizrahi like holidays and creating, you know, um, events around that, or either Ethiopian Jewish holidays. I feel that that's something that is a very, what I consider low-hanging fruit, that can very much, open not only children's eyes within, the day school, but also within our community as well. Just knowledge about, because not too many people know about the Ethiopian Jewish community, which is part of where my family comes from. Or not a lot of people know about. They know about the Mizrahi Jewish community, but they don't know, in detail, the culture that had cultivated around there. And so I just think that that is something that, that's systemic, very low hanging fruit that I would bring, to Beth as a way in which can start to make those connections and start to highlight and be able to truly see, or to truly start to become intersectional in terms of like the identities that exist within the Jewish community.
I was going to say, I recently learned the term Ashkenormative, which, is used to describe what's happening in all our community, the American Jewish community, exactly what you said, that everything is geared towards Ashkenazi Judaism, and people will use Yiddish, and people will, and there are Jews for whom that is not their Jewish experience. And a good friend of mine is a Mizrahi Jew, and I've talked to her about that. So thank you.
In Hebrew, the word is starting from really after the state of Israel began to bring in the Mizrahi Jews. And of course, in the 80s and 90s, when the Ethiopian Jews came in, lehit ashkenaz, to make someone Ashkenazi. Lehit ashkenaz, that's what the government really tried to do. Can I ask Janet Kelford? Janet, if you were on, can you share the sisterhood's nice little gift to the school regarding books that are going to be purchased by the librarian, the school librarian, to help along this educational process?
Well, yes, we are. The sisterhood is donating money to the school.
Oh, Brotherhood.
Can you hear me?
And Brotherhood.
And Brotherhood.
Sorry, yes, Brotherhood is doing it as well.
We just
Sorry.
voted the other day.
Okay, I don't want to forget.
You get credit.
So we are donating money in order to buy books that specifically bring more diversity into the libraries at a young age for the kids. So they will be books by Black authors, by brown authors, by you know, and that's
Subject matter. So
subject matter as well will be more diverse. It will apply things that apply to people, communities other than a community like ours, which is very, very homogenous.
Thank you. So I will say our librarian has done a phenomenal job of adding a lot of minority voices to our library. This effort is also to make sure that not just the main library, but all of the mini libraries that we have in every classroom reflect that diversity.
Mrs. B, the librarian, has done a phenomenal job, and this was even way before all of this took place. I mean, I remember walking into the library the first day of school, as you know, after she'd been hired, and I just could not believe the books on the shelves on display being encouraged, for the students to take home, even the ones that she, handpicked for my own daughters. They're special. She is special. She's so good at what she does. She really is. She and I actually curated a Black History walking tour through the library in February last year, and she did it again this year on her own because I wasn't able to assist, but it was just amazing. And the kids came in with their iPads and they were able to scan the QR codes, and it pulled up either, the author or the moment in time where it took place, biographies, interviews, discussions, from major moments in time from the civil rights movements, from some of these important Black voices. It was extraordinary. She is so genuine and sincere with what she does. It's amazing.
I just have to say, as her predecessor, she is, every time I walk through the library, she is truly fabulous, extraordinary.
She really is. She really is.
Yeah.
So, Joan?
It's really Roberta. Actually, it's Roberta. I just wanted to bring up a point that it is interrelated, and I'll try to tie it together. I came out of the closet. I was 53. I was a little slow. And my friend from kindergarten, a number of years earlier, said to me, "So when did you turn gay?" And I had a few other friends that said things that were really offensive, but it was out of ignorance. Now, I'm not saying, God knows, I know homophobic people, and I know really a lot of bigots, to be quite honest. And I think it's inherent on all of us, as we're saying tonight, to educate people. Because I'd like to think that mostly when people say these hurtful comments, it's out of ignorance. They just don't know. And I think what Beth is doing here is phenomenal. And, I'd like us to share it with the masses of the temple because, people on this call are, they have an ear towards this. They're obviously participating in this because they want to see racial equality and gender equality. So, how do we share this with the whole congregation? That's for you, Rabbi.
So we are going to have a directors meeting to try and discuss how we do that, because right now everything, of course, is opt-in. We are recording this session with the permission of our panelists, so thank you. I think what you said, Roberta, is very powerful in terms of, I can think of just so many personal moments, where I learned something and then looked back at like my behavior before knowing that. And didn't know. I think about how I used to, when I was a little kid, we used gay as like a, like if you were calling someone stupid or something, you'd say, "Oh, you're gay." And then my best friend, tried to kiss me, and all of a sudden, like, "Oh wait, I love someone who's gay. Oh wait, like I'm like, why am I using this word? This is horrific," So I think that is a good question in terms of how do we get people to get the information? I know so many people, especially the people who have opted into this call, are people who are hungry and who are seeking it out. But the bulk of the community, sits in comfort. Sharon Sokol in our chat, she just wrote, this program has significantly highlighted how we live in our own bubble within our temple community, how we've been isolated within our systemic preferences and beliefs. And she's on the nose, as she usually is. We engaging in this work, as Jenna pointed out, when she was upset that, the temple did something for Charlottesville, the school didn't. And, she wanted her children, like Dafka, because they go to a Jewish school, to have a conversation about Charlottesville. But that was a choice that the administration made, not to have that conversation. So that's a privilege, right? If you're going to say, I don't think we need to have that conversation. I'm going to let my kids be protected and live in this bubble, at least until 6th grade. As she said, her children don't have that option. So I think the question is, how do we get people out of that place of comfort? Because it is much more comfortable to remain silent, right? It's much more comfortable. And what that equals, like, a lot of people think silence is neutral, but we know, like, silence is
Silent.
At best apathy, but usually, right, it's you're being a partner in the hate. David, did you want to?
Yes. I think that on the one hand, it might be a good idea to consider some ongoing structures within Beth to engage the congregation on these issues. So if you wanted to have a group focusing on LGBTQ issues, a racial justice group, other groups where you could do any number of things. I think education is one important aspect. You could have a speaker series. Definitely reading books is a good thing. Forming coalitions with organizations, maybe in your area or statewide throughout Florida, that are dealing with those specific issues, whether religious organizations or not, and perhaps learn from what they're doing and maybe develop some policies, some like a mission as far as how the congregation should deal with all of these topics. I think there are a lot of things that can be done. Realizing that it has to be done, I think, is the great first step. So,
Thank you. Yes, I know we already have plans for our entire staff to do a training and for our board, but we need it to radiate out. So thank you. Jay Halpern, you have your hand raised. And you are muted. Okay. Judith, you also raised your hand. Did you have another question?
Hello, I think I unmuted.
There you go.
And I'm going to.
Oh, and now you're muted again.
Okay, hold it. Here we go. And there I am.
Hey.
Okay. Hi. So this would be to any of the Black panelists. First of all, Rabbi, thank you for this great program. If we were to see you at Beth Am and wanted to have coffee with you or take you to breakfast or lunch, how would be the best way to approach you? I know you've got lives, and if all the 1,000 members start doing this, it might be difficult for you to have a life, but I know if I saw you, I'd want to grab you and take you somewhere and spend some time with you. So first of all, is that offensive? How should we do that? how can this happen?
I mean, I'm perfectly okay with that. I don't take offense to it. I'm always willing to have a conversation. Like, I'm always willing to discuss like certain things. And I know that especially everyone here is extremely like sincere in their feelings or wanting to get to know. So there's not a feeling of, or at least for me, I can't speak to for anybody else, but I know that there's not a tokenistic aspect to it. I very much, one of the things that I try to do, one of the things that, as Jenna said, which is a burden, but it's a burden that I have assumed that I understand, is the one I'm willing to educate. One of the things is that, not everyone is going to be, willing to educate, and you're going to have to be okay with if they're not particularly comfortable with it. But I appreciate you asking, first, and I feel that if anything, that is the first step. So thank you. I'm very much, the kind of person who is willing to have that conversation, willing to talk, and willing to connect, but just to let you know, not everyone, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak to anyone else. And if they're not in a position or not willing to want to educate, then that's something that you have to accept.
Well, it's a time issue too for people if they get inundated, but if anyone else wants to say something. I have to tell you that when I see a Black member of Beth on campus, I'm so happy. And I'll bet everybody on this, you have no idea there's a Black man who comes to Torah study, and I'm too, I won't curse here, I'm too blank shy to walk up and say, I want to take you to breakfast. I want to meet you. I want to increase my circle. So, our story is one of coming forth from slavery to freedom. So I wish we were 80% Black, okay? And I hope that's not a micro insult.
I don't take it as an insult. I know it's sincere, but when I see a Black person on campus, I also get excited, and I cross the field and I go up to them and I introduce myself and I let them know how happy I am to see them. I let them know who I am, and I exchange contact information and tell them to please call on me if they should need anything, whether it's, something has come up in the school or they just want to know, how to set up a play date or which parents or families are better. And that's what a community does. You do, reach out to people, you see someone, you're happy to see them, or you're interested in getting to know them. You walk right up to them, introduce yourself. Hey, how are you? It goes such a long way. When everything happened in the beginning of June with the George Floyd protests and, everyone suddenly waking up, I told my friends that, call on your Black friends, neighbors, coworkers, and let them know that, you're there for them in solidarity, because it makes a big difference when things like this are going on. You should know who your friends and allies are, And it's so important to be able to say that without a shadow of a doubt. I know that Jay Halpern is a good guy, and that's someone that I can depend on if something, goes crazy, that this is a safe house, is a safe person for me. And not everyone, is like that, even within the Jewish community, even within the Reformed Jewish community, so it is important for you to stand up and be, introduce yourself to any Black congregant. And it goes even beyond that, at your place of business, at the grocery store, a friendly face goes such a long way. It really does.
Thank you so much. Hi, David.
Hi. I just wanted to say that even though I'm not in the Miami-Dade area, I'm in Philly, and
I'm from Philly. Cheltenham
Oh,
High.
great.
Cheltenham High. Reggie Jackson.
Small world. I was just going to say that based on current circumstances, I don't know when I will get to come to Florida, but I will say that I do enjoy talking with people and exchanging ideas, and people should feel free to reach out to me if, there's anything that was said today that you want to talk about in more detail, or just, want to pick my brain on things. Please, by all means. I don't know if, I can leave my email address or website or whatever. And,
Rachel, please get that for us. I had an experience on Juneteenth Day. The guard at our neighborhood is a Black man, and he just walked out when I was taking a walk. And I said, Happy Juneteenth Day. And I got the greatest response imaginable. He was the only Black person I saw that day. But I would just tell everybody in the congregation that if you do take that little extra step that Jenna suggested, it will be well received, whether it's at the grocery store or anywhere else. So thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I don't know if we have more questions. I don't want.
Can I add one other thing? This is Jeff. We talk of it could be really confusing to know where to go and how to learn to educate ourselves, because just as I was touting Robin DiAngelo's book a minute ago, while we were talking, I get a link to an article in the Atlantic from John McWhorter about how her book White Fragility is condescending to Black people, and how we have to be, another article about the false promise of anti-racism books. So I know for me, I want to learn, and I want to be very genuine in what I'm doing. But it's sometimes hard. It's hard to know, exactly where to do the work and put your focus. But something like this tonight goes a long way, I think.
I will say, Jeff, it's hard to know, yes, where to go, and I don't think there's any one book who does
right,
that.
No, I realize that.
I think, White Fragility has its positives.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of great books out there, and but
yeah. I would love to recommend one, which is Yumi and White Supremacy. The reason I want to recommend it is it's very similar in terms of what it covers. It quotes a lot of other books that I like, including Michelle Alexander's work. And so you want to talk about race. But what this does that other books don't do is it has journaling at the end of each chapter. And I think that's the most important piece. It's really not just to read, but to really sit with it and ask yourself, okay, where do I see myself in this? And what am I going to do about it? And I think that's really where we're trying to go. To our panelists, there's a lot of discussion in the chat about what are we going to do about this, and what are next steps. I know, David, you suggested bringing in somebody. That is definitely something I would love for us to work on. We have a new head of school who definitely cares about these issues and has plans of things that she would like to do once she gets officially installed. But I think that's a really good question for all of us in terms of what are you going to do about it? How can you commit to show up and to speak up and to do things? I want to kick it back to, Tim, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just one of the things I always like to tell people, especially those who are very sincere about, the whole idea of becoming anti-racist and the process involved and what books they should read, who should they be talking to, who's an authority on this or versus that, I always like to say, like within the Jewish community, the Black community is not a monolith. We are a tapestry, we are mosaic, we are, different in terms of our approach of how we view things, just like any other, individual. And so I like to say, you can read everything that there is to read, about anti-racism, and you may still come across someone who will not like what you say. And so you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with that. But more importantly, you have to treat, which is what, what I've been seeing, which is a lot of conversations that are starting to happen around, rights, and especially Black Lives Matter and anti-Semitism and things like that, taking one person's word as indicative of, the entire race, and, taking and going and pushing forward with it. And so I implore everyone, as you're doing the work, try to, like you would yourself, seeing yourself as an individual, treat these, pieces of information as, a form of education on, anti-racism. And, you may be going forward doing things, and you may say something that, you read in a book that you thought that would be helpful. And then, that person had a very adverse response to it. And it's okay. It's okay. It is definitely okay. If anything, I feel that, at least I can speak from my experiences, I always know when someone has good intentions behind it, even if it's not, the best thing that they are, even if they're not saying it the way in which, I can receive it, I can always understand, the intentions behind it. And so I implore everyone to take that sort of viewpoint, as you're, learning, as you're seeking out resources.
Just to follow up with what Tim said, I think it's actually good that there are differences of opinion, that we all don't agree on things. I think it would be very boring, number one. And number two, how do you learn? How do you grow? Unless you actually share ideas, maybe things that you never thought of. I think that what's important is that making sure that we understand what the differences are, acknowledge them, and then make sure that we focus on what we have in common, and making sure that what we have in common is not overshadowed by the differences, whether those differences are subtle or, or they're actually major. But I think that one thing, just Tim had mentioned about anti-racism, I'm reminded of a quote from, I wish I could attribute this to myself, but Sandra Lawson, who is a Black LGBTQ rabbi, she wrote a piece in the Forward recently, and she said, you are either racist or anti-racist. Those are the two choices. The latter means you are working every day, either emotionally or physically, to dismantle the racism that we all have been taught since day one in the United States. And I think that she really encapsulates how I feel about this, that that's really at the heart of the work that we should be focusing on right now, no matter how we do that. And there are a lot of different ways to do it.
It's beautiful. I'm friends with Rabbi Lawson. We were in Rabbis Without Borders together, and her voice is, she is incredibly inspiring in any conversation.
She is.
Nice to hear her, sharing her own story to help make us all better.
Oh, yes.
So, Tim, when you were, mentioning that you can read all of these books, but remember we're individuals, right? I think that's, I remember, somebody calling me when I was younger, like calling me a Hebrew. And I was like so pissed. And like now I like somebody says that I don't mind, like, so even myself, like I have changed like what I react to, but it made me think of a conversation that we were having with Jenna preparing for this evening. And I don't know if you're comfortable, but she talked a little bit about how like being a representative, like being a token. And I think, I'm a Jew from Indiana, like, so I knew what it meant to be a token in terms of being behalf of the Jewish people, but people didn't know I was Jewish unless they knew I was Jewish. So Jenna, do you mind?
Being a Black woman, working in the corporate world, being Jewish, I'm often, the only person of color in the room. And even, it's for me, it started even as a child. My mother told me that everything I did was not for me, it was for me and all of the Black community, that people would look at me and see my behavior, my achievements, the way I spoke, the way I represented myself out in public and beyond as representative of the entire Black community, all of them, every single one of them. And that a bad experience with just one non-Black person could ruin any future Black experiences that this person could have. So every time I put myself out there and into the public world, I had to be the best person that I could be, because this person that I'm interacting with, they may be waiting for X, Y, and Z to happen because this is what's happened to them on every other Black experience. And when it doesn't, I get to leave them and hopefully they go, maybe they're not all the same, or maybe that isn't what I saw, like on an MTV music video. This isn't exactly what I was expecting from seeing whatever movie, and I tell people all the time, like, I can't do that. Like, you're representing the Black community. And they're like, no, just be yourself. And it's like, I don't get to be myself. I never get to just be myself. There are lots of things I would love to say and do and respond to people, and I can't, because I know that there is this weight on my shoulders that I have to put my best self forward. If not, I'd be going 6 steps back. And I can't allow that for myself or the Black community. We can take no further steps back.
Thank you, Jenna. So I know that we are almost at 8:30. I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd love to just, David, Tim, Jenna, like if any of you would like to make some sort of closing statement, or just, make sure that we talk about if there was something that you think there's so much we didn't get a chance to talk about, but like one thing that you want us to make sure to touch on before we sign off.
I think one of the things that I would like to just highlight is, when we celebrate our holidays, as always, like this joke that one of my friends used to say, like, most of our holidays are, they tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat and drink, and how like that is like very much indicative of like a lot of almost all of the holidays that we celebrate, but I would say sometimes take the time to really, especially one of my favorite, holiday ever is Pesach. And the main reason why, like, my favorite holiday is Pesach is, reading the Haggadah and talking, when they talk about oppression and they talk about, we do this every year, as a reminder, not only of what we've been through, but also the idea that, tyranny, oppression happens in every age, and we must be mindful of that. And I feel that, one of the things that, as we start to, as we go into our Jewish practice and, after years and years and years, it just becomes like, subconscious at certain times. You say your prayers, you eat, you do, now that we're in this moment where we're having to really reckon with ourselves about oppression, death, killing and tyranny, to really, as we go into our Jewish practices, really try to understand and really try to get at the heart of it. Why is it that we are saying these prayers? Why is it that we are, using these books? Why is it that we're being reminded, or we're reminding ourselves of these things? Because it happened to us, but be mindful that it could happen to anyone. And that's what we have to be mindful of. And we have to work to make sure that we may have gone through that, but just to make sure that no one else has to. So I just want to leave everyone with that.
Tim, I know you're, studying the environment and economic impact, which I'm very passionate about, but I just really want to recruit you to become a rabbi now. Because yes, and yes. David?
Yes, well, once again, thank you very much for having this and for inviting me to talk with everyone. I believe that the Jewish community is no stranger to justice, racial justice, and when we're looking at how to grasp this moment, how to seize this moment, I believe that what we should do is, when we look at our organizations, we look at our structures, we look at our community, I think we have to make sure that racial justice and all of these issues that we've been talking about are infused into what we do. As I said, many organizations, many communities are having these discussions, and I think some are going to make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, we will appoint this token person or have a person in charge of race or diversity, thinking that somehow that person will shoulder the entire burden for the rest of us. But really, we have to incorporate these tenets, incorporate this philosophy into everything, bake it into the cake, as it were, so that people feel included, people feel as if their concerns, that they themselves are being represented and being heard, so that it's a natural sort of thing as opposed to a forced, surface level window dressing kind of thing. And I'm not saying that Beth would do that, but I'm saying that I know that there's going to be a tendency on the part of some folks in 2020, when they look at what's going on, to think that somehow we can just do what was done before. And I think that a year from now, 10 years from now, we'll come back and realize that things haven't really changed because people didn't do the hard work and really weren't willing to do it. So that's what I would say. And as I said, having discussions like these, I think, are immensely important. And I'm happy to be a part of it.
We're happy to have you. Thank you, David. Jenna?
Oh, I think we all should just remember that, let's just take this one day at a time, one person at a time. And remember that for many of you, you get to meet people and, introduce yourself to them, and they discover things about you that they didn't know. And for Black people, we get to meet people and they have already summed us up before we get a chance to open our voices and speak. There are people that see us and they are afraid. There are people that see us and they are disgusted. And know that when you see a Black person. That's why I say a friendly face goes a long way, because it does. You know, we're always playing offense, you know, because everyone else is just being so defensive against us. And it's not fair, and it's not right. And all of you being here and just listening to our stories and our thoughts is your one step forward, just in choosing to be a part of this today. So reflect and go out in the community. Well, don't go out, but only if necessary. Yeah. But, you know, just share and tell your family. And when you hear or see something, stand up right then and there, not after the fact. Right then and there, say something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jenna Saul, Tim Kirby, David Love, which I hope everyone now, you're talking about finding things to read. I hope you read his work. Really well done. And I know that a lot of people have been talking about what you wrote on Sunday in terms of the high celebrity, these celebrities and other high profile people saying anti-Semitic things, like in defense, like trying to support Black Lives Matters. And we had a speaker last week who really asked us, like, who does that serve? You know, who does it serve? Who does it serve when we hold up racist institutions, when we are silent and don't speak up against microaggressions? Who does it serve, right? And who does it serve when we don't speak out when we see anti-Semitism, right? And as David, as you pointed out at the beginning, like we're really working against white supremacy, and sometimes that can be uncomfortable for those of us who visually present as white. Because letting go of any privilege is uncomfortable, but we have been maybe sitting in our comfort for too long. You know, they said, as Tim reminded us, to like really soak in our prayers. The purpose of prayer is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable, right? So let's let our faith make us do better. So thank you everybody so much for being with us. This is not the end of the conversation. It's just the end of the July series. So please look forward to more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.